Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. This isn't a fairy tale. There are no glass slippers, no perfect timing, no easy goodbyes. It's the kind of love that burns quietly, the kind that leaves scars deeper than any wound you can see. 5 years ago, they had everything: youth, passion, and a promise that nothing could break them. But one accident, one cruel choice, and a lie whispered in the dark changed everything. She left without a trace. He learned to live without a heart. Now, fate pulls them together again, not in the warmth of old love, but under the cold light of ambition. She walks into the boardroom thinking it's just another business deal. He sits at the head of the table, hiding the storm behind a perfectly calm smile. Two strangers with the same heartbeat. One truth buried under 5 years of silence, and as their worlds collide once more, they'll discover that some loves don't fade. They just wait. Beneath the veil. Boston never really slept. It just shimmered. Even in winter, the city pulsed with quiet hunger. For power, for success, for something nameless that kept people moving long after midnight. And somewhere between all that noise, Evelyn Monroe was trying to pretend she belonged. The 32nd floor of Harrington & Co. was a glass box suspended above the world, clean, modern, and ruthless. Assistants darted between offices, their reflections blurring in the glass walls. The air smelled of coffee and ambition. Evelyn sat at the far end of the boardroom, hands folded neatly on the mahogany table, waiting for her presentation to load. On the screen, the first slide glowed blue and white, the colors of control. Her reflection on the laptop looked like everything she'd worked to become: composed, sharp, untouchable. No one would ever guess how hard she'd fought to erase the woman she used to be. Nova Dynamics just arrived, whispered Max, her assistant, poking his head through the door. Evelyn's pulse skipped, though she didn't know why. Right, she murmured. Let's make this quick. Max smiled nervously. Quick? This deal could make you VP. She allowed herself a faint smirk. Or make my life hell for a month. Same thing, he joked, before disappearing again. She exhaled slowly, straightening the cuffs of her cream blazer, a ritual more than a need. The glass door opened. 3 men entered, crisp suits, polite smiles, the usual choreography of corporate power. Evelyn greeted them with practiced warmth. The exchange of business cards, compliments, and half-truths followed, the dance she'd mastered over 5 long years. Then the 4th man stepped in, and the air changed. He didn't rush, didn't even glance around. He simply existed, and the room bent around that gravity. The man was tall, dark-suited, eyes unreadable. A stillness clung to him, the kind that came from people who'd learned long ago how to command silence. Evelyn felt it before she even looked up. And then she did. Dominic Vale. For half a heartbeat, everything inside her went still. The hum of the projector, the faint shuffle of papers, the nervous coughs, they faded into a soundless blur. All she could hear was her own pulse, loud and wrong. He hadn't changed, at least not where it mattered. The same sharp jaw, the same eyes that once looked at her like she was the only thing that existed, but now those eyes were colder, older. He looked like the version of himself she had always feared he'd become, the kind forged from heartbreak and revenge. Miss Monroe, he said, his voice smooth and low, like a blade wrapped in velvet. It's an honor to meet the face of Harrington & Co.'s expansion team. Her throat tightened, but her smile held. Mr. Vale, welcome to Boston. He extended his hand. She took it, professional, detached. But the touch was electricity and memory and pain. His grip was firm, familiar. And when she pulled back, the ghost of his warmth lingered like a bruise. You look different from what I remember, he said quietly, the faintest curve on his lips. Her pulse stumbled, but her tone didn't waver. I get that a lot. I'm sure you do. The room carried on. Assistants whispering, slides changing, people pretending not to sense the undercurrent that crackled between them. But Evelyn could feel his gaze like a weight on her skin. He wasn't just looking at her. He was studying her, dissecting the woman she'd built from the ashes of someone named Ava Hart. The meeting began. Numbers, projections, controlled voices. She spoke when required, sharp and confident, refusing to let the tremor in her hands show. Across the table, Dominic leaned back in his chair, too calm, too quiet. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to discuss strategy. It was to test her. "You've built quite the reputation here," he said casually. "Impressive considering you only appeared 5 years ago." She met his gaze evenly. "I prefer to let my work speak for itself." "Oh, it does," he murmured, loudly. No one noticed the invisible battlefield unfolding across the table. The tiny pauses, the loaded silences, the words that sounded harmless but weren't. To everyone else, it was just business. But to Evelyn, it was standing across from the man she once loved, the man she had destroyed to save. When the meeting ended, papers shuffled, polite applause filled the air. She thought it was over, until his voice cut through again. "Miss Monroe, a word in private?" The room hesitated. Her team exchanged looks. She nodded, calm. "Of course." The door closed. The world shrank. Dominic didn't sit. He stood near the window watching the city, tall, still, untouchable. Boston's skyline reflected off the glass behind him, slicing his silhouette into fragments. He didn't turn when he spoke. 5 years, he said softly. Evelyn froze. "Excuse me?" He faced her then, slowly. 5 years since I last saw a woman who looked exactly like you. Same eyes, same voice. Different name, though. Her heart pounded once, painfully. "Coincidences happen," she said carefully. He stepped closer, too close. "Not to me, Mr. Vale. Or should I say," he interrupted, voice a razor. "Ava." The name hit her like impact. Her breath caught. "You're mistaken," she managed. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You always said that when you lied." Her fingers curled around the folder in her hands. "If this is about business—" "Oh, it's always about business," he said, moving past her toward the door. "And ghosts. The kind that never learned to stay buried." He opened the door but didn't step through. "You don't have to run again, Ava," he added quietly. "I already found you." And then he was gone. Evelyn stood alone in the empty room, her pulse echoing in her ears. Outside, the city roared on, 1,000 voices, 1,000 lights. She closed her eyes and whispered, almost to herself, "I wasn't running from you, Dominic. I was saving you." But the words dissolved before they reached the air. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The rain outside Boston's windows whispered against the glass, but her mind was louder. She sat by the dim light of her living room, the city humming far below, her thoughts caught between the woman she'd become and the girl she used to be. Seeing Dominic again had ripped open something she'd spent 5 years stitching closed. She told herself it was just shock, just business, just coincidence, but she knew better. His voice, his stare, even the way he said her name without saying it had brought everything back. Back then, the world had been smaller, simpler. New York had felt like a dream when she first met him. A city made for the reckless, for those who believed love could rewrite rules. Dominic Vale wasn't the man he was now. He was still ambitious, yes, but softer around the edges, the kind of man who'd hold her hand under the table during fancy dinners just to make her smile. He used to sneak her into rooftop gardens his family owned, places filled with glass lanterns and the smell of wet stone after rain. They'd talk about everything, the future, the risks, the way his parents would never understand. He'd laugh, saying he didn't care. "They'll come around," he'd tell her, his eyes burning with the kind of certainty only youth could afford. "We'll make them." She'd believed him because back then, his belief had been enough. Their love had its own rhythm. Loud arguments, soft apologies, the kind of passion that lived somewhere between fire and peace. They'd made plans, whispered promises in the dark. She remembered the last anniversary they'd celebrated. 2 years together, He'd booked a small restaurant by the river, a quiet corner just for them. He'd brought her a single white rose, laughing when she called him dramatic. "I like dramatic," he said. "You should know that by now." They'd toasted to forever. She remembered the warmth of his hand against hers, the way the city lights flickered across his face when he told her she was the best decision he'd ever made. Then came the night that destroyed everything. He was supposed to meet her. She'd been waiting in that same restaurant, scrolling through messages, smiling at the memory of him running late as always. But that night he never came. When her phone rang, she answered it expecting him to joke about traffic. Instead, a stranger's voice, trembling, said there had been an accident. Dominic's car had been hit. There were no details, just chaos, sirens in the background. The rest of the night was a blur. The cab ride, the hospital, the rain pounding against the glass doors as she stumbled inside. The smell of disinfectant clung to her clothes for days after. When she finally saw him, her breath stopped. He lay still beneath white sheets, pale and bruised, machines keeping rhythm for the heart that once raced for her. She took his hand, whispered his name, begged him to wake up. "Please, Dom, it's me. You're okay? You're gonna be okay?" She kissed his fingers, cold and unresponsive, and felt something inside her fracture. That was when the door opened. His parents entered, not with worry, but with purpose. Mrs. Vale's voice was calm and sharp, the tone of someone used to being obeyed. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Hart." Evelyn turned, confused, terrified. "He needs me. I'm not leaving him." "He doesn't need you," the woman said quietly. "He needs to heal, and you, your kind, have already caused enough damage." Before Evelyn could answer, Mr. Vale stepped forward, his voice low and deliberate. "You'll leave tonight. You'll disappear. If you don't, your father's job and health won't last the week." She froze, her throat tight. "You're threatening my father?" "We're protecting our son," Mrs. Vale replied simply. "You'll do the right thing. I assume you understand what's at stake." Evelyn looked back at Dominic. The steady beeping of the monitor filled the room, a cruel reminder of life barely hanging on. She wanted to scream, to fight, but her father's face flashed in her mind, his weak heart, his tired smile. She couldn't risk him. She couldn't risk Dominic either. So she did the only thing she could. She brushed a trembling hand across Dominic's cheek and whispered, "I love you. I'm sorry." Then she walked away before they could see her fall apart. Outside, the rain was merciless. She sat in her car, shaking, her hands gripping the phone like it might save her. She typed one message, deleted it, typed again, until the words blurred. Every word felt like poison, but she sent it anyway. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's broken." The moment she hit send, she sobbed so hard she couldn't breathe. Then she started the car and drove away, leaving everything that mattered behind. 3 days later, Dominic woke up. The first thing he felt was pain, sharp, burning, but he ignored it. He looked around the sterile room, searching. "Ava," his voice cracked, barely a whisper. The nurse tried to calm him, but he grabbed her wrist. "Where is she?" The nurse hesitated, then said softly, "She left." He didn't believe her. He thought maybe she'd gone home. Maybe she'd come back later. Then his father walked in. The expression on his face told him everything before he spoke. "She's gone, Dominic. She wasn't right for you. Let it go." He demanded her phone number, her address, anything. No one answered. Finally, his father handed him a phone. "She left this." One unread message blinked on the screen. He opened it, read it once, then again. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's broken." Something inside him went silent. The world narrowed to the sound of his own heartbeat and the faint hum of machines. He threw the phone against the wall, the glass shattering, his voice raw. "You're lying," he whispered to no one. She wouldn't say that. She wouldn't. But she had, or so he believed. And that belief turned to rage. Months later, when the doctors called his recovery a miracle, he didn't correct them. It wasn't a miracle. It was revenge against fate. Every step he learned to take again was a promise. Never again would he be weak. Never again would he need someone enough to be destroyed by them. The boy who once laughed under the rain was gone. replaced by a man who knew that love was just another form of leverage. Years later, when he looked across that conference table in Boston and saw her, alive, calm, pretending he was a stranger, he almost laughed. After everything, after the pain and silence, she was right there, breathing the same air as him, and all the anger he'd buried came rushing back, not loud but cold, deliberate. She thought she could hide behind a new name, a new life, a new version of herself. But he knew her too well. Dominic Vale had once loved Ava Hart with everything he had. Now he only wanted one thing from her, the truth. And this time, he wouldn't let her walk away before he got it. Morning came like glass, pale, sharp, and fragile. Boston's skyline glimmered in the reflection of Vale Industries' tower, all steel and silence. Inside, the world moved to Dominic Vale's rhythm. Precise, efficient, merciless. He stood by the window, a cup of black coffee untouched in his hand, the city unfolding beneath him like a chessboard. From this height, people were nothing but pieces, and he was very good at moving them. But this morning, even he couldn't stop his mind from replaying a single image. Her. Evelyn Monroe, or rather, the ghost who'd stolen her name. He'd seen her again after 5 years of silence, and the memory refused to leave. The calm curve of her shoulders, the careful way she'd avoided his eyes, the tremor in her breath when he called her Ava. He told himself it didn't matter, that she was just another player in the game. But the lie didn't sit right. It never had. Mr. Vale. Noah, his assistant, appeared at the door, voice tentative. The Harrington team's here for the follow-up session. Do you want me to chair it, or... Dominic turned, expression unreadable. No, I'll handle it. Noah hesitated. After yesterday, are you sure that's... wise? Dominic's lips curved faintly. Not a smile, not really. Wisdom has never built empires, Noah. Go prep the room. The conference floor buzzed with the quiet tension that followed Dominic wherever he went. Executives straightened their jackets. Assistants checked tablets twice. And at the far end of the long glass table sat Evelyn Monroe. Hair pinned, posture perfect, face a mask of composure that only someone who had shattered once could wear. She didn't look up when he entered. But she didn't need to. The shift in the air told her he was there. Good morning, Dominic said, voice smooth but empty of warmth. Good morning, Mr. Vale. Professional, controlled, the way strangers talk. He took the seat directly across from her. Their reflections met first, ghost-like in the polished glass, before their eyes did. Let's begin, he said. The meeting moved fast. Numbers, projections, graphs. Evelyn spoke clearly, confident but cautious, her focus pinned to the data on the screen. Dominic watched her without watching her, taking notes, nodding occasionally, but never missing a beat of her rhythm. He saw the way she steadied her breathing before answering. The way she used logic as armor. She was brilliant. She always had been. And yet, every time she spoke, he caught flashes of the woman who once whispered, "I love you," like a secret. Your projection for Phase 1 shows a 40% return, he said suddenly. Yes, she replied, meeting his eyes. Based on our early testing. He leaned back. Ambitious. Achievable, she countered. Or reckless, he murmured, quietly enough that only she could hear. You always liked walking that line. Her pulse jumped. This isn't personal. Of course not. His tone was silk over steel. We wouldn't want that, would we? A ripple of unease passed around the table, though no one quite understood why. By the time the meeting reached the midpoint, the tension was almost visible. Every exchange between them carried two meanings. One for the room, one for the ghosts. It was a duel fought in tone and glance, not words. Finally, Lewis, one of Harrington's partners, cleared his throat. Perhaps we can move on to Phase 2 projections. Dominic didn't look away from Evelyn. We'll get there. I'm still intrigued by Phase 1. Evelyn folded her hands neatly on the table. If you have a specific concern, Mr. Vale, please state it. I'm sure we can clarify whatever's unclear. He tilted his head slightly. I just find it fascinating how easily some people can reinvent themselves and still remain a mystery. The silence thickened. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "We're here to discuss numbers, not people, are we?" he said softly. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the projector. Evelyn broke the silence first. "If there are no further questions, I'll continue." Dominic gestured for her to proceed, eyes never leaving hers. "By all means, Miss Monroe." The way he said her name made it sound like a lie. The final slide faded. A polite round of applause followed. Evelyn exhaled slowly, relief flickering behind her calm expression. Then the door opened. "Dominic." The voice was melodic, unmistakable. Every head turned as Charlotte Whitmore entered. Poised, flawless, the kind of beauty that demanded attention. Her silver heels clicked against the marble, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Sorry to interrupt," she said smoothly, glancing around the room with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Clearly," Dominic replied, tone even. "Oh, come now." She walked closer, every step deliberate. "You didn't tell me you were working with her." Her gaze landed on Evelyn, and for a fraction of a second, the warmth vanished. Evelyn rose slightly from her seat, polite smile perfectly in place. "Miss Whitmore, a pleasure." "Likewise," Charlotte said, lips curving just enough to look genuine. "I've heard so much about you." "Only good things, I hope." Charlotte laughed softly. "That depends who's telling the story." The tension snapped, invisible but sharp. Around them, assistants pretended to shuffle papers. No one dared breathe too loudly. Dominic's expression didn't change, but the muscle in his jaw tightened. "Charlotte, we'll talk later. This is a closed meeting." "Oh, I know." She brushed his sleeve lightly with her manicured hand. "I just came to drop this off. A flash drive. Gold, expensive, unnecessary. Consider it a gift." "From you," Dominic said quietly, "always comes with a price." Charlotte smiled, leaning closer. "Only when it's worth paying." Her perfume lingered long after she left. When the door finally closed behind her, no one moved for several seconds. Evelyn's hands were perfectly still on the table, but her pulse thudded in her ears. She'd seen that look before, the one Charlotte had given her. Ownership disguised as charm. The meeting stumbled forward for another 15 minutes before ending in a blur of handshakes and forced civility. As the team began to disperse, Dominic's voice stopped her once again. "Miss Monroe, stay." The others hesitated. Evelyn nodded. "Of course." When they were alone, the facade slipped, just slightly. "Charlotte shouldn't have been here," Dominic said. "Seems like she goes where she pleases." His eyes met hers. "So did you, once." She froze, words caught between anger and something she didn't want to name. "You're still good at turning everything into a weapon. And you're still good at pretending you don't feel the hit." The silence between them hummed. Finally she spoke, voice soft but firm. "If you plan to make this personal, Dominic, I'll withdraw from the project." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same one from 5 years ago, cedar and smoke. "I don't want your withdrawal," he said quietly. "I want the truth." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then you'll have to earn it." He smiled, slow and dangerous. "I always do." Outside, flashbulbs burst against the glass, reporters waiting, drawn by rumors they didn't yet understand. Headlines would come within hours, but inside the boardroom, amid the echo of their unspoken history, two people stood across from each other. Not partners, not enemies, just unfinished business in the shape of love and ruin. Dominic's voice was low when he finally broke the silence. "You have no idea what you've started, Evelyn." She turned toward the door. "Neither do you." And when she left, the faintest trace of her perfume stayed behind, haunting him like memory dressed in silk. The days that followed the second meeting were a blur of whispers and camera flashes. Every major business site had a story about Dominic Vale's mysterious relationship with Harrington's lead negotiator, Evelyn Monroe. The articles were written with the usual tabloid finesse, half admiration, half venom. They called her the woman who tamed the coldest CEO in Boston. She hadn't tamed anyone. If anything, she was fighting to breathe. At the office, the air had changed. Her colleagues still smiled, but their eyes said something else. Curiosity, suspicion, quiet calculation. The partners avoided standing too close to her in the elevator, as if proximity to scandal were contagious. Evelyn ignored it all, burying herself in the project, pretending that spreadsheets and forecasts could silence gossip. But late at night, when she looked out her apartment window over the frozen lights of Boston, she could still hear his voice. Every cutting word, every look that lingered too long. Dominic hadn't spoken to her since the meeting. Not directly, but he didn't need to. His influence was everywhere. Her phone buzzed with new requests from Nova Dynamics, each more urgent than the last. Documents were misplaced, forcing her to attend impromptu calls with his team. It was as if he was testing how far she'd go before she broke, but he underestimated how much she'd learned about survival. Then the message came. "Miss Monroe, this is Charlotte Whitmore. I think we should talk." It wasn't a question. It was an order delivered with sugar. Evelyn hesitated for half a second before replying, "Of course. When and where?" "Tomorrow. Fairmont Hotel, 10th floor cafe. 10 o'clock. Don't be late." The line went dead. The next morning, Boston's winter sky hung low and colorless. Evelyn arrived early, wearing the same armor she'd worn for years, tailored jacket, soft lipstick, the faint smile of someone who'd learned to hide nerves beneath professionalism. The Fairmont's lobby gleamed with marble and gold, filled with the quiet confidence of wealth. Charlotte was already there, of course. She always was. She sat by the window, sunlight catching in her hair, a vision of controlled perfection. When she looked up, her expression bloomed into something that almost passed for warmth. "Evelyn, so lovely of you to come." Evelyn sat opposite her, crossing one leg neatly over the other. "You said it was important." Charlotte's smile deepened. "Oh, it is. I just thought, given all the attention lately, we might clear the air." "Woman to woman, about what?" Evelyn asked, keeping her tone neutral. Charlotte stirred her coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against porcelain. "About Dominic. And you." Evelyn blinked once. "There's nothing to discuss. That's where you're wrong." Charlotte set the spoon down, her voice light but edged. "You see, Dominic can be persuasive. I've watched him do this before. Find a new project, a new cause, a new woman, and make her believe she's special." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "I don't think this has anything to do with you." Charlotte's eyes sharpened. "It has everything to do with me. Dominic is my fiancé." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't let herself react. "Congratulations!" Charlotte leaned back, smiling. "Thank you. Though I'd prefer not to share my congratulations with leftovers." Evelyn's hands folded tighter in her lap. "If you're trying to intimidate me, you're wasting your time." "I'm not trying," Charlotte said softly. "I'm succeeding. You've done well for yourself, Evelyn, or should I say Ava. I know who you are. The girl who vanished from New York after Dominic's accident. New name, new city, new career. Impressive reinvention. But you see, in my world, disappearing doesn't mean forgotten." Evelyn froze for just a second. "You've been digging into my past." Charlotte smiled like it was a compliment. "Let's call it due diligence. You're not the first woman who thought she could rewrite her story. You just did it better than most." "Why are you telling me this?" Evelyn asked quietly. Charlotte leaned in, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "Because I like to give people a chance to walk away before I have to make them." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "I'm not walking away from my job. I've worked too hard to get here." "Your job won't protect you," Charlotte said, her voice soft as silk. "Dominic is mine. Always has been. Always will be. Whatever you think you're doing here, stop. Before it costs you more than a career." Evelyn stood. "You sound like you're afraid of something." Charlotte's smile didn't falter, but her eyes darkened. "I'm not afraid. I'm careful. You'd be wise to learn the difference." She lifted her cup, took a slow sip, then added casually, "Oh, and tell your little girl to be careful. The city can be dangerous, especially for children." The world went still. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She didn't move for a heartbeat, then said evenly, If you ever mention my daughter again, I'll forget I'm supposed to be polite." Charlotte tilted her head, amused. "So she is yours? How sweet." Evelyn turned and walked away before the anger could consume her. Outside, the cold hit her lungs like a punch. The streets buzzed with midday noise, but everything sounded distant. She didn't notice the man leaning against a lamppost across the street, watching her leave, phone in hand. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She double-checked the locks, pulled the curtains closed, and sat on the edge of Leah's bed, watching her daughter's small chest rise and fall. The little girl stirred, murmuring something about school, then rolled over. Evelyn brushed a hand across her hair, whispering, "You're safe, baby. You're safe." But even she didn't believe it. She saw it again the next morning, the same black sedan idling at the corner, engine running, windows tinted too dark. It was there when she left for work. It was there when she came home. By the third day, she was sure. Someone was watching her. Across town, Dominic sat in his office, scrolling through photos on his desk tablet. They were grainy shots sent by an anonymous email, Evelyn and Charlotte at the cafe. Evelyn leaving, pale and shaken, Charlotte smiling like a cat that had just tasted blood. Noah stood quietly near the door. "We traced the sender. It came from a private security network connected to Whitmore Enterprises." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Of course it did. What do you want me to do?" "Nothing yet," Dominic said quietly. "Let her think she's untouchable." But when Noah left, he didn't move for a long time. He just stared at the photos, remembering the way Evelyn had looked the last time he saw her. Angry, defiant, terrified. He'd promised himself he didn't care what she felt. Now he wasn't so sure. That evening, as the city drowned in neon and mist, Dominic drove alone through Back Bay. He didn't plan to go to her apartment, but somehow that's where he ended up. Her building was modest, quiet, with narrow windows and brick walls that had seen better days. He parked across the street, watching as the lights in her window flickered off one by one, until only one remained. Her daughter's room, he guessed. For a moment, he let himself imagine a version of life where he'd been allowed to know that child, to stand beside Evelyn without destroying everything around them. Then he killed the thought. Sentiment was weakness. He was about to start the car when a black SUV turned the corner and stopped near the building. Two men stepped out, wearing dark coats, one of them lifting a camera. Dominic's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He got out of his car before he could think better of it. The men saw him, froze, then quickly climbed back into their vehicle and drove off. Dominic watched until they disappeared, then looked back at the building. Her apartment light was still on. She had no idea what kind of world she was caught between. The next day, Evelyn arrived at work pale, exhausted. The whispers hadn't stopped, but something in her demeanor had changed. Harder, quieter. She spent the morning in meetings, the afternoon in silence. Around 3, she stepped into the lobby for air, and that's when she saw Charlotte again. The heiress stood near the elevator, surrounded by reporters, her perfect smile aimed squarely at the cameras. "No comment," she said sweetly, "but I can assure you Mr. Vale and I are very happy together. Our families are thrilled." Evelyn's heart sank. The reporters turned, flashing cameras as they spotted her. Someone shouted, "Miss Monroe! Is it true you were romantically involved with Dominic Vale before his engagement?" She didn't answer. She just walked past, the elevator doors closing mercifully behind her. From the mezzanine above, Dominic watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. Charlotte's voice drifted up from the lobby, perfectly rehearsed, every word calculated. He turned away, the muscle in his jaw twitching. He'd played this game long enough to know when someone was declaring war. Later, in his office, he made one call. "Noah, I want full surveillance on Charlotte Whitmore. Discreet, no mistakes." "Understood, sir." "And Miss Monroe?" There was a pause. "Keep her out of it, for now." That night, Evelyn drove home slower than usual. The city felt heavier somehow. When she turned onto her street, she saw the black sedan again, parked 2 houses down. She didn't look directly at it, didn't speed up, didn't let them see fear. She parked, got out, walked to her building. The car didn't move. Upstairs, Leah was waiting at the table with a drawing in hand. 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. "That's you," Leah said proudly, pointing to the taller one. "And that's the man who brings the cookies." Evelyn frowned. "What man?" "The one downstairs," Leah said matter-of-factly. "He said he's your friend. He wears a hat." Her blood went cold. She forced a smile, took the paper and said, "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Now go brush your teeth." When Leah ran off, Evelyn went to the window. The sedan was gone. Across town, in a penthouse lit by city lights, Dominic poured himself a drink he didn't touch. His phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. "She's been warned." He deleted it immediately, staring out at the skyline. Somewhere down there, Evelyn Monroe was being hunted by ghosts neither of them had buried. And Charlotte Whitmore had just made the mistake of waking the one man who'd learned to live without mercy. Boston at night was a city made of reflections, glass, rain, and secrets. From the top floor of the Aurelius Lounge, the skyline looked like 1,000 stars trapped inside windows. Music drifted through the air, elegant, quiet, deceptive. Tonight wasn't a celebration. It was a performance, a show of power between 2 empires pretending to trust each other. Evelyn Monroe stood near the window, her reflection framed by the river lights below. The champagne in her hand had long gone warm, untouched. From a distance, she looked calm, tailored, precise, composed. But her pulse told a different story. Somewhere behind her, she felt him. Even before she turned, she knew. "Miss Monroe," came his voice, smooth as glass and just as cold. "You look composed tonight." She turned slowly. "That's called professionalism, Mr. Vale." He smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Before she could reply, the sound of heels echoed against marble. Charlotte Whitmore. The room itself seemed to adjust to her presence. The tilt of heads, the shift in tone, the faint perfume of privilege. She glided toward Dominic, her gown shimmering like liquid silver, her arm slipping through his with the ease of possession. "There you are." "Darling," Charlotte said, her voice soft and sugared for the crowd. "I was starting to think you'd abandoned me to these dreadful financiers." Dominic's jaw tensed. "You seem to be doing fine." Charlotte smiled, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve. "Oh, but you know I prefer your company." Her eyes flicked briefly to Evelyn. "Miss Monroe," she purred, "your dress is lovely. Though I must say, you have an unfortunate talent for being exactly where I am." Evelyn didn't flinch. In business, proximity is sometimes unavoidable. "Of course," Charlotte said sweetly. "Just remember where you stand." Dominic's tone cut through the tension like a blade. "Charlotte, why don't you check on the investors? I'll join you soon." Her smile faltered for the briefest second, then returned tighter. "Don't take too long," she whispered, kissing the air near his cheek before turning away. Her perfume lingered. So did the silence she left behind. When the crowd finally thinned, Evelyn set her glass down. "You should be careful," she said quietly. "People are starting to notice cracks in your perfect world." Dominic poured himself a drink, the deep red catching the light. "Cracks don't scare me. Lies do." She met his gaze, unwavering. "Then maybe you should stop surrounding yourself with them." His jaw flexed. "I tried that once. It didn't end well. They stood a few feet apart, 2 people orbiting the same wound. Outside, the river gleamed like molten glass. Inside, the air felt too heavy to breathe. 5 years, he said finally, his voice low, dangerous, and not a single word. Her throat tightened. "You make it sound simple." "It was," he said, stepping closer. "You left. No explanation. Just a message cold enough to kill. You think it was easy?" Her voice cracked. "You think I wanted to leave you?" He didn't answer. His silence was sharper than anger. Evelyn looked down, trying to steady herself. "You don't know what that night was like." "I know what it did to me." He leaned forward, eyes burning. "You broke me, Ava." Her name on his tongue felt like a blade sliding under her ribs. "Don't call me that." He laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Why? Because it makes it real?" She stepped back, pulse hammering. Because that girl is gone. He followed her, closing the space inch by inch. Then tell me, who am I talking to now? The ghost who ruined me? Or the woman still pretending she doesn't remember how it felt when I touched her? Stop it, she whispered. He didn't. Tell me, Ava. Enough. Her voice shattered the air. For a moment, everything stilled. The music below, the murmurs outside, the sound of her own breathing. She turned away, gripping the edge of the table like it might hold her together. I didn't run from you, she said quietly. I ran from what your parents would have done if I stayed. He froze. What are you talking about? Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. They came to the hospital after your accident. They told me to disappear, said they'd destroy my father, his career, his life, if I didn't. I believed them. Dominic's expression fractured, disbelief flickering into something raw. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything, she said. I just want you to know the truth. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. The tiredness behind her eyes, the years she'd carried alone. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Why didn't you tell me? He asked finally, voice rough. Because you would have gone after them, she said, and I would have lost you anyway. The glass in his hand trembled before he set it down. He exhaled a sound that was almost a laugh, hollow, fragile. You think you saved me? But all you did was kill what was left. Her eyes shone, but she refused to cry. I know. He stepped closer until there was barely a breath between them. His voice softened. You have no idea what it's been like, waking up every day with your ghost in my chest. Evelyn swallowed hard. I think I do. Their eyes met, pain against pain, memory against memory, and then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't forgiving. It was desperate, furious, broken, the kind of kiss that starts wars and ends them all at once. For a second, time disappeared. The city, the noise, the years, gone. When they finally pulled apart, she was trembling. Her lipstick smeared faintly against his jaw. His breath came uneven. This doesn't fix us, she whispered. No, he said, eyes dark and tired. But it reminds us we're not dead yet. She looked away, blinking back tears. You think pain means we're still alive? He managed a faint, broken smile. It's the only thing that ever does. Silence settled again, heavier than before. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, tracing thin silver lines down the glass. Evelyn stood, her reflection merging with his in the window. We can't go back, Dominic. I know, he said softly. But maybe we can stop pretending we don't still bleed. She turned toward the elevator. Good night, Mr. Vale. He didn't answer. He just watched her go, the echo of her heels fading into the hush of the city. When the door closed behind her, Dominic looked down at the untouched wine in his glass. For the first time in years, it didn't taste like victory. It tasted like memory, and somewhere below, Boston kept shining, unaware of the two ghosts who had just torn their hearts open above it. The rain didn't stop that night. It followed her, down the elevator, through the lobby, into the waiting cab, a curtain of silver that refused to let her breathe. Evelyn sat in silence as the city blurred by outside. Boston at night was all reflections and ghosts, and tonight, she was both. Her hands trembled against her lap, her lips still burning from a kiss she should have never let happen. When the cab stopped outside her apartment, she paid the driver without a word. The street was empty, the world quiet, but her heart wouldn't stop screaming. Inside, the apartment was immaculate. Books in perfect order, dishes washed, curtains drawn. It was the kind of order born from chaos, a way to survive by pretending everything could still be controlled. She hung her coat, then poured herself a glass of water. Her reflection stared back from the kitchen window, tired, pale, unfamiliar. She looked like a woman haunted not by what she lost, but by what she had to bury. The glass in her hand slipped slightly. She caught it just in time, breath shaking. For a moment the world spun, and the years fell away. Rain again. Always rain. The night she lost everything. The city had looked exactly like this. She remembered the smell of antiseptic, the hum of hospital lights, Dominic's name echoing down sterile halls, doctors rushing past her body frozen in shock. And then, the quiet, the unbearable quiet of a heart monitor flatlining somewhere down the corridor. When the elevator doors opened that night, she didn't expect to see them, his parents. Mr. Vale's face carved from ice. Mrs. Vale's eyes red with fury disguised as grief. "You've done enough," his mother hissed. Evelyn had tried to speak, to explain, but they didn't want explanations. They wanted a scapegoat. Mr. Vale stepped closer. His voice was calm, precise, the kind used to make deals that ruined lives. "If you care about him at all," he said, "you'll disappear. Permanently." "I won't leave him," she'd whispered. He smiled. A small, terrifying smile. "You will, because if you don't, your father won't have a career left by morning. His practice will burn, and I'll make sure Dominic never forgives you for what comes next." The folder he handed her was thick. Financials, photos, signatures, proof that they already owned her future. By dawn, she was gone. She never saw Dominic wake up, never heard him ask where she was. And when she found out she was pregnant 2 months later, she didn't even have the right to tell him. Back in the present, Evelyn sank to the floor beside the window, knees pulled to her chest. The rain outside pressed against the glass, soft and endless. She whispered, "I didn't want to leave you." But there was no one to hear it. Her phone buzzed, a single text message lighting up the dark screen. "Leah. Mom, did you make it home okay? It's raining here too." A small, broken smile touched her lips. "Yes, baby," she typed. "I'm home." She didn't add that her heart wasn't. Setting the phone down, she closed her eyes, her mind drifting back to that hospital hallway, to Dominic lying unconscious, machines beeping softly, her trembling hand reaching toward him before the guards pulled her away. She remembered whispering through the glass, voice cracking with fear and love. "I'll come back when it's safe. I promise." But promises made in fear don't survive reality, and she had spent 5 years paying for that lie. Lightning flared outside, casting her reflection against the glass. One face split into two. Evelyn Monroe, Ava Hart, the woman she became, the girl she used to be, neither of them whole. She pressed a hand to her heart, whispering as if he could still hear. "I didn't save you, Dominic. I just made sure you'd hate me enough to live." And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse drowned in shadow and whiskey, Dominic Vale sat alone too, staring at the same rain, remembering the same night. 2 souls in the same storm, neither knowing how to stop drowning. The city felt wrong lately. Evelyn Monroe had learned to live among ghosts, but now they were moving again. And this time, they had eyes. The same black sedan parked across from her building 3 mornings in a row. The same number calling at odd hours, silent, then gone. The same faint sound on the line when she said her daughter's name. Leah. She told herself it was paranoia, that trauma had a way of breathing even when buried. But tonight, as rain streaked her apartment window and thunder rolled far away, she knew better. She wasn't imagining it. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message flashed across the screen. "You should have stayed gone." Another followed. "He's already mine. You had your chance." Her pulse spiked, fingers shaking as she deleted them. No name, no proof, just venom, elegant and precise. It could only be one person. Charlotte Whitmore never made idle threats. She made promises dressed as elegance. Evelyn sat still for a long moment, trying to breathe through the rising panic. She couldn't go to the police. She couldn't go to Dominic, especially not him. The moment he knew, everything would unravel, and Leah would no longer be safe. Across the city, Charlotte stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window in her penthouse, swirling red wine as she watched lightning crawl across the skyline. "She looks tired," she murmured, eyes fixed on the small tracker feed glowing on her phone. Her assistant hovered behind her, nervous. "The messages were sent, Miss Whitmore, and the report from Vale Security will reach Mr. Vale by morning." Charlotte smiled. "Good. Let him find it himself. A man like Dominic always investigates what he shouldn't." He'll dig until she bleeds. She took a slow sip, her reflection fractured in the glass. Evelyn built a new life on a lie. I'm just reminding her the world remembers. The next morning, Dominic Vale stared at the file lying open on his desk. A series of surveillance photos, Evelyn leaving her apartment, Evelyn in a cafe, Evelyn walking hand in hand with a little girl. His throat went dry. The caption under the photo read, "Unconfirmed, daughter." For a long moment he said nothing. His hand hovered over the page, tracing the faint outline of the child's face. The same dark hair, the same soft expression. It couldn't be. And yet it was. "Noah," he said finally, voice low. His assistant appeared in the doorway. "Who authorized this?" Noah hesitated. "It came from an anonymous client, sir. The payment was routed through one of Miss Whitmore's shell accounts." Dominic's eyes darkened. Of course it was. He closed the file, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Get me Evelyn Monroe's schedule for the next 48 hours, discreetly." That night, Evelyn left the office late. The streets were slick with rain, the air thick with the hum of traffic. She clutched her umbrella tighter as she crossed to the parking lot, then stopped. The black sedan was there again, headlights off, engine running. A silhouette sat behind the wheel, motionless. She felt her breath catch. Her hand moved slowly toward her phone, but before she could unlock it, the car pulled away. Smooth, silent, deliberate. She stood frozen for a moment, pulse racing, before forcing herself to move. When she reached home, she went straight to Leah's room. The little girl was asleep, her small hand curled around a stuffed rabbit, breathing softly. Evelyn sat beside her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "It's okay," she whispered. "Mommy's here." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed herself. Somewhere across the city, Dominic stood in his penthouse staring at the rain. He had the file open again, the photo of Evelyn and the girl now creased from where he'd been holding it. His mind replayed the past, the night she vanished, the letter she left, the lies he told himself to stay sane. If this child was hers, if she was theirs, then everything he thought he knew had just shifted. He picked up his phone and dialed, then stopped halfway through. He wasn't ready, not until he knew the truth. Outside, thunder rolled again. Somewhere, Charlotte poured another glass of wine, smiling at the storm she'd started. Evelyn locked the windows, checking each one twice. Dominic stood alone, watching the city bleed light through the rain. And above them all, the night kept its secrets. For now. For 3 days, Dominic didn't sleep. He told himself it was work, but it wasn't. It was Evelyn. The photos, the messages, the little girl with her eyes, his eyes, kept replaying behind his eyelids every time he tried to close them. He'd ordered his security team to shadow Evelyn for her safety, but he hadn't told her. He couldn't. He wasn't sure if he was protecting her from the world or from himself. Every night he watched the reports come in. Target left apartment at 8:40, walked 2 blocks to cafe. No contact. Child picked up from school, escorted home. The updates were clean, mechanical, and yet each line cut deeper. He wanted to stop reading but couldn't. The thought of her in danger made his chest tighten, but the idea that she'd built a new life without him hurt worse. Charlotte, meanwhile, was already 5 moves ahead. She'd learned long ago that Dominic Vale was predictable only when it came to the woman who broke him. So she used it. She slipped the USB drive into his briefcase one morning, something he'd think he found by accident. A collection of photos, one video clip, carefully staged, Evelyn sitting in a quiet cafe, meeting a man in a suit. They shake hands, lean close, whisper something. The man slides a small envelope across the table. It looked like business, but the angle made it look like a secret. That evening, Dominic watched the footage alone in his office. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened. He replayed it twice, 3 times, until the grainy clip burned into his mind. Noah entered quietly, hesitant. "Sir, she's still being watched." "No suspicious movement since yesterday." Dominic didn't answer. He simply closed the laptop and said, "Pull the footage from that cafe. All angles. Now." "Yes, sir." When he was alone again, He poured himself a drink and stared at the window. The reflection that stared back wasn't the man she once loved. It was the man she feared he would become. Across town, Evelyn was doing her best to live like nothing had changed. She kept her head down at work, smiled when spoken to, laughed when expected. But she felt the tension under her skin, that strange sense of being followed even in the safest places. Once, when she turned around suddenly in the parking lot, she swore she saw a shadow duck behind a pillar. She gripped her keys like a weapon until she reached her car. That night, she called Leah's school to say she'd be picking her up personally for the rest of the week. "Just a busy schedule," she lied, voice trembling. When they got home, Leah drew while Evelyn cooked dinner. The smell of garlic and rain filled the apartment, and for a brief moment it almost felt normal. But then the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. Her breath caught. She reached for her phone, flashlight on, scanning the room, before realizing the whole block was dark. Just a blackout. She forced a laugh, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just the storm." But outside, a black car idled again. Same spot, same driver. Watching, waiting. Half an hour later, a message pinged Dominic's phone. Unknown sender. Power outage on Monroe's block. Possible break-in reported nearby. He didn't hesitate. "Get the car," he ordered, already grabbing his coat. When he reached her building, the streetlights had come back. Everything looked normal. Too normal. He stood outside her door, debating whether to knock. What would he even say? "I had you followed? I don't trust you, but I can't stop caring?" Then he heard her voice from inside. Calm. Steady. Reading softly to Leah. And then the moon told the stars to stay a little longer. He closed his eyes and exhaled. He didn't knock. He just turned, walked down the hall, and left. The next morning, Charlotte called. Her voice was syrup and poison. "Dominic," she said sweetly, "I'm worried about you. You've been distracted lately." "Just busy," he replied flatly. "Oh? Because rumor has it you've been playing bodyguard to your company's consultant. Tell me, does she still call herself Evelyn or has she switched names again?" He didn't rise to the bait. "Be careful, Charlotte. You're trespassing on dangerous ground." She laughed softly. "Dangerous is what you make it. I only wonder what happens when you finally see who she really is." When the call ended, Dominic stared at the city through his office window, his reflection fractured by the glass. He could feel it now. The storm gathering, quiet and inevitable. He didn't know who was hunting whom anymore. Only that someone was going to get hurt. The morning after the media storm had subsided, Dominic felt an unusual stillness in the city. The chaos Charlotte had orchestrated seemed to have calmed, at least on the surface. But Dominic knew better. Shadows lingered where he couldn't see, and Greer's men had not given up. Each quiet day was a chance for them to strike, and he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Not for a second. He moved through Vale Industries with his usual measured calm, making sure every loose thread in Evelyn's professional life was secured. Emails were carefully filtered, rumors intercepted, and minor mistakes quietly corrected before they could be noticed. Yet even as he worked, the memory of Evelyn's tense expressions over the past days haunted him. She had endured scrutiny and whispers without knowing he had been shielding her from every potential fallout. That afternoon, Dominic left the office in his black sedan, the city bathed in a low golden light. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, eyes scanning every movement on the streets. A sense of unease prickled along his spine, a gut instinct that told him something was about to happen. Greer was patient, cunning, and ruthless. Dominic had learned never to underestimate him. Then, from a narrow alley ahead, a black SUV lunged into the street. Tires squealed, metal scraped, and before Dominic could react fully, gunfire rang out. The first bullet struck near the side of his car, shattering glass, sending shards scattering across the pavement. His heart raced, every muscle tensing as he swerved sharply, narrowly avoiding impact. But movement in his peripheral vision froze him. Evelyn. She had been walking toward a cafe across the street, seemingly unaware of the danger. Time slowed. The SUV accelerated, and instinct overtook thought. Dominic slammed the brakes, launching himself out of the car, moving with the fluid precision of someone trained for moments like this. "Evelyn," he shouted, diving forward. His arms wrapped around her as she threw herself instinctively behind him. A sudden impact sent both of them sprawling across the asphalt. Pain erupted in Evelyn's arm and side as she hit the ground. Blood seeped through her blouse. Dominic felt a surge of panic, his own body trembling with the fear of losing her. The SUV skidded past, its tires smoking as it disappeared down a side street. Greer's men had vanished, leaving behind the echo of violence and the smell of burning rubber. Dominic's eyes scanned every shadow, every reflection in the nearby glass, searching for the attackers. But there was nothing, only the aftermath. "Stay with me," Dominic murmured, voice low but urgent. He pressed his hand gently against her side, trying to stop the bleeding. Evelyn's eyes were wide, reflecting shock, fear, and something else. An unspoken understanding of the danger they had just survived. Paramedics arrived within minutes, efficiently taking control. Dominic followed, refusing to let go, his protective instinct absolute. He refused to let anyone take her from him, not this time, not ever. Every step to the ambulance, every motion in the chaos of sirens and flashing lights, was filled with a singular purpose: keep her safe. Inside the hospital, Dominic paced the fluorescent-lit corridor, adrenaline still coursing through him. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, speaking in clipped tones, checking vitals, cleaning wounds, and stitching minor lacerations. The antiseptic smell mingled with the faint metallic tang of blood. Every sound, every movement heightened Dominic's sense of hypervigilance. Finally, a nurse handed him a folder. "Here's her medical file," she said gently. Dominic's fingers trembled as he took it. Evelyn Monroe, mother, daughter Leah, 5 years old. The words blurred before him. His mind froze, then spun wildly. His heart pounded. Mother, daughter, 5 years old. Every suppressed memory, every fragment of a life he had long ignored, rushed to the surface. The casual mentions of a child he had brushed aside in conversations with Evelyn, the fleeting glimpses she had let him see, now they carried an entirely new meaning. Dominic's hand shook as he flipped through the folder. He stared at the pages, his mind a chaotic whirl of disbelief, awe, and an emotion so deep it nearly took his breath away. Could it be? Could Leah, Evelyn's daughter, be his own? Every instinct screamed yes. The resemblance in photographs, the subtle hints in Evelyn's stories, the tiny clues he had thought irrelevant, all pointed to the truth he had never dared to imagine. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic, sterilized linens, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Dominic paced just outside Evelyn's room, the folder heavy in his hand. His mind raced with fragmented thoughts, looping over the revelation he had just stumbled upon. Leah, his daughter, 5 years old, his blood, his responsibility. Every muscle in his body ached with tension. He had protected Evelyn for days, weeks, silently maneuvering behind the scenes, keeping her safe from Charlotte's manipulations and Greer's operatives. He had done it without expecting recognition or thanks. And yet, none of that preparation had readied him for this. The knowledge that the child Evelyn had mentioned so casually, the little girl she spoke of with warmth and pride, was his own flesh and blood. The doors to her room opened, and a nurse wheeled Evelyn inside, her arm bandaged and bruised, but otherwise stable. Dominic followed closely, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. He stood at the foot of her bed, staring down at her as she blinked up at him, pale but conscious, eyes reflecting confusion and a hint of fear. "Dominic," she whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm fine, it just hurt a little." "You're safe now," he said, his voice low, almost strangled by emotion. "I've got you." The nurse left, giving them a few moments of privacy. Dominic's gaze swept over Evelyn, taking in every detail, the slight tremble in her hands, the small bruise forming at her temple, the faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. And yet, more than the injuries, it was the vulnerability that struck him. The realization that the person he had been protecting silently was more precious than he had ever allowed himself to admit. "Evelyn, I need to ask you something," he began cautiously, trying to steady his racing thoughts. You mentioned your daughter before. Leah, 5 years old. Tell me, how long has she been in your life? Evelyn's eyes flickered, a subtle hesitation that he noticed immediately. Since she was born, she said softly. And she's everything to me. I never wanted to complicate things or put anyone in danger, especially not you. Dominic's chest tightened. Every word confirmed what he had begun to suspect. The thought of the years he had been unaware, the moments of her life he had missed, clawed at him. Yet beneath the regret, a profound tenderness began to bloom. He had a child, a little girl who carried a part of him, a living, breathing connection to Evelyn and a life he had not known existed. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. And she's mine. The question left his lips as a whisper, almost afraid of the answer. Evelyn looked at him, eyes wide, searching his face. Her own breath caught. Yes, she said simply. She is. You just didn't know. Dominic felt the world tilt. Every calculated step he had taken, every protective maneuver, every silent intervention, all of it suddenly carried an entirely new weight. He was no longer merely a shadowed guardian. He was a father. And the realization hit with a force that made him stagger slightly, though he steadied himself on the edge of the bed. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice barely above a whisper, a mixture of awe and hurt tangled together. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. I wanted to, I tried, but I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't stay. Afraid it would ruin everything between us. Even before it could start, I thought I could handle it on my own. I thought I could protect her, and somehow protect you too. Dominic's hand found hers on the bed. Her skin was warm, soft, familiar, and yet the knowledge of her secret, the child she had protected alone, filled him with both longing and a quiet fury at the years lost. Evelyn, you didn't have to do this alone. I would have been here. I would have protected her. I would have protected you. Always. Tears welled in his eyes, unbidden. He bent slightly, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. And now I know. I want to be here, for both of you. Always. For the first time in days, Evelyn allowed herself to breathe fully, the tension in her chest loosening slightly. The storm of media scrutiny, the whispered suspicions, the shadow of Greer's reach, all of it faded for a moment in the presence of this revelation. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was hope. It was recognition. It was the acknowledgement that the man who had silently guarded her had always been ready to fight for her and for their child. As the evening deepened, Dominic finally allowed himself to sit beside her, hands never leaving hers. And then, the sound of little feet padding across the hospital corridor drew their attention. A small voice called softly, "Mommy, Daddy." Leah appeared in the doorway, holding a small stuffed animal in her hand. Her eyes widened as she took in the man kneeling beside her mother. Dominic froze, taking in every detail, the shape of her face, the curve of her smile, the bright intelligence in her gaze. Every line, every expression mirrored his own in ways that were impossible to ignore. He opened his arms slowly, his voice trembling. "Leah, it's me. I'm your dad." The child hesitated for a heartbeat, then ran forward, climbing into his arms. Dominic held her tightly, feeling the warmth of her small body, the soft rhythm of her breathing. For a moment, the world outside the hospital, the chaos, the violence, the corporate intrigue, ceased to exist. Evelyn watched them, a mixture of relief, awe, and unspoken emotion filling her chest. She had protected them both, kept her secret close, and now, finally, the truth had emerged. Dominic's presence, once distant and silent, was now tangible, real, and irrevocable. In that quiet room, amidst the antiseptic smell and the soft hum of machines, a new chapter began. Dominic's silent defense, his unseen guardianship, had led him here, to the realization of his own fatherhood. And as he looked into Leah's trusting eyes and felt the warmth of Evelyn's hand in his, he understood the profound responsibility and the profound love that awaited him. Outside, The city pulsed with its usual relentless pace, indifferent to the revelations within the hospital walls. But inside, time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat marking the beginning of a new connection. A fragile yet powerful bond forged through danger, secrets, and years of unspoken truths. The city had shifted into evening, streets glowing with the orange and white light of street lamps and passing cars. Dominic's car glided silently through the traffic, every sense heightened, heart pounding with anticipation and a hint of apprehension. The hospital visit had changed everything. Evelyn was recovering from the ambush. Yes, but what mattered now was the truth that had finally surfaced. Leah was his daughter. His heart ached with a mixture of regret, awe, and a deep longing he could not fully name. The apartment building loomed ahead, familiar yet foreign to him. Every step of the journey had been measured, deliberate. He needed this first encounter with his daughter to be perfect, tender, meaningful. He parked, exhaling slowly, and walked toward the door, trying to compose himself. But the weight of what was about to happen pressed down on him. 5 years of absence, 5 years of unspoken love and unknowable moments, were about to converge in one fragile, intimate scene. The door to Evelyn's apartment opened before he could knock. She was standing there, leaning slightly on the frame for support, her arm still bruised from the attack. Her eyes widened as she took in his presence. "Dominic," she whispered, voice tinged with surprise, concern, and a flicker of something softer, something unspoken. "I need to see her," Dominic said simply, nodding toward the inside of the apartment. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of vulnerability that only she could sense. Evelyn stepped aside silently, her own heart pounding. The apartment smelled of crayons, paper, and faint traces of dinner. Warmth, domesticity, normalcy. It was a stark contrast to the chaos Dominic had faced only hours before. And then he saw her. Leah, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, small hands smudged with crayon as she worked on a drawing. The child paused, looking up with wide, expectant eyes. Dominic froze, stunned. The drawing was simple but unmistakably tender. A woman and a man holding hands. A small child standing between them, smiling. The man, he recognized instantly, the posture, the hair, the subtle curve of the shoulders. This was him. Leah had drawn him without knowing that he was real. His heart clenched. He knelt slowly beside her, careful not to startle, his eyes fixed on the drawing. "This is you?" he asked softly, his voice almost breaking. "Yes," Leah said, beaming. "That's Mommy and Daddy, and me." She held the paper up proudly. Dominic's chest tightened. He felt a strange electric ache, an overwhelming mix of joy, disbelief, and a deep, uncontainable love. The child who had existed in his absence, who had grown unaware of him, was here, tangible and real. Every heartbeat reverberated in his chest. Evelyn stood quietly, a gentle smile playing on her lips, tears threatening to spill. She watched Dominic kneel beside their daughter, watching him process the moment, feeling the gravity of the truth in his eyes. Every subtle gesture, every inhalation, carried weight. The weight of recognition, of connection, of years lost yet now reclaimed. Dominic extended his hand slowly toward Leah. I'm your dad," he said, voice thick with emotion. The child blinked, then hesitated for the briefest moment before climbing into his arms. He held her carefully, feeling the warmth of her small body, the soft rhythm of her breathing, and the undeniable proof of his connection to Evelyn and the life he had never fully known. Leah giggled, leaning against him. "You're real," she whispered. "Mommy told me about you, but I didn't know." Dominic kissed the top of her head gently, his own tears slipping free despite his efforts to maintain composure. "I'm real," he whispered back, "and I'm here now. Always." Evelyn approached, placing a tentative hand on his shoulder. Her gaze met his, and in that silent exchange, volumes were communicated. Forgiveness, relief, acknowledgement, and an unspoken promise. "He's yours, she said softly, almost as if confirming the obvious. You've always been his dad, now you're finally here. Dominic exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, letting himself absorb the moment. He had imagined this encounter countless times, always wondering if he would falter, if the weight of lost years would be too much to bear. And yet, here he was, holding their daughter, feeling the delicate bridge of connection he had never dared hope to cross. He knelt on the floor, bringing himself to Leah's level, hands gently cradling hers. I promise you, he said, voice firm but tender. I will never leave you. I will protect you, guide you, and love you. Always. No matter what. Leah's small hands grasped his, her trust absolute, her smile bright and unwavering. In that instant, Dominic understood the depth of responsibility and the immense quiet joy that came with fatherhood. He had walked a long road to arrive here, through danger, deception, and personal sacrifice. But the destination was perfect in its simplicity. The connection of a family, forged and revealed through love and truth. Evelyn moved closer, sitting beside them. Dominic looked up at her, eyes glistening. I should have known sooner. I should have been here. Shh, she said, placing a finger gently on his lips. It doesn't matter. You're here now. That's what counts. He exhaled, allowing the tension to drain, the ache of years spent in absence slowly dissolving in the warmth of this shared moment. For the first time since the ambush, since the silent battles and manipulations of Charlotte and Greer, Dominic felt a profound sense of peace. Here, in this small apartment, amidst crayons, drawings, and the quiet laughter of a child, the chaos of the world outside faded into insignificance. Leah tugged at his sleeve, pointing to another drawing she had made. This one's of us, she said proudly. See? That's Mommy, that's you, and that's me. We're a family. Dominic studied the paper, tracing the lines with his finger, marveling at the simplicity and perfection of the depiction. Every stroke, every color, every detail reflected the love and innocence of a child who had grown up with stories of him, but without him physically present. He felt tears streaming down his face, unashamed, raw, and real. I see it, he whispered, his voice choked. I see us, and we will be a family, from now on. Evelyn rested her head lightly on his shoulder, allowing herself to finally exhale after days of tension, danger, and unspoken truths. The storm outside, the corporate intrigue, Charlotte's schemes, Greer's reach still existed, but inside this apartment, they had found a sanctuary, a moment of reprieve, and a foundation for the future. Dominic's gaze swept between Evelyn and Leah, seeing both the past and the potential of the life they could share together. Every challenge they had faced, every threat, every silent intervention, every hidden truth had led to this, an undeniable, beautiful connection, solidified in the warmth of family and the clarity of truth. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to fully embrace it, the role of protector, of partner, of father. And as the evening deepened outside the apartment windows, the trio sat together, a quiet, unshakable bond forming, a family forged through love, courage, and the revelation of what had always been meant to be. Outside, the city pulsed with its relentless, indifferent energy. But inside, a new world had begun, one built on trust, love, and the promise of a shared future, even in the face of danger still lurking in the shadows. Dominic, Evelyn, and Leah had collided with fate once more, and this time, the collision had created something lasting, unbreakable, and profoundly transformative. The rain had started again, soft at first, then relentless. The kind that erased the city's edges, turning light into smears of silver. Evelyn didn't mind the rain usually. It made Boston feel quieter, less cruel. But that night, something about it set her teeth on edge. She kept glancing at the rearview mirror. The same dark sedan had been behind her for 3 blocks now. Mommy, the lights look funny, Leah said from the back seat, her voice drowsy. Evelyn forced a smile through the mirror. That's because the rain's dancing on the glass. She changed lanes. The sedan changed too. Her fingers tightened on the wheel. She turned left at the next light. The car behind her didn't. Relief fluttered in her chest, shaky but real. See? All good, she whispered more to herself than to Leah. But 2 minutes later, at the intersection near the river, the headlights came back. Blinding, sudden, wrong. She had time for one thought. No, not now, before the impact came. The world exploded. Metal screamed, glass shattered, air turned to thunder. Then there was only white noise, and the sound of Leah crying somewhere far away. Evelyn tried to move, but pain pinned her like ice through her chest. "Leah," she gasped. Everything tilted, then went dark. Dominic was in his office when the call came through his private line, one number that only his head of security used. The man's voice was ragged, panicked. "Sir, Miss Monroe, there's been an accident." Dominic didn't ask where or how. He was already moving. By the time he reached the underground garage, the storm was breaking against the windshield. His driver tried to speak. He didn't hear a word. When he arrived at the river bridge, flashing lights painted the street in blue and red. He pushed through the crowd before anyone could stop him. The twisted remains of a silver sedan leaned against the guardrail. EMTs worked under the rain, voices sharp and urgent. "Female, mid-30s, pulse weak, possible concussion. Get her in the rig now." Dominic froze at the sight of her. Blood streaked Evelyn's temple. Her hair clung wet to her face. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, enough for recognition to pierce through the haze. "Dominic?" He knelt beside the stretcher before they lifted it. "I'm here," he said, his voice raw. "Leah?" "She's safe." That word steadied her. The corner of her mouth twitched as if she wanted to smile. Then everything went black again. When the ambulance door slammed shut, Dominic stood motionless in the rain, his heart pounding so violently he thought he might collapse. Then he saw her, the child standing near a paramedic, shivering under a blanket far too big for her. Leah. She looked up when he approached, eyes wide and wet. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. He didn't need to ask whose eyes they were. He knew. The hospital was too bright, too clean. Dominic paced outside the trauma bay, soaked through, ignoring the ache in his chest. Leah had fallen asleep on the bench, curled up in his jacket. Every now and then, he looked at her just to reassure himself she was real. Charlotte arrived not long after, wearing a coat the color of bone and an expression rehearsed to perfection. "I came as soon as I heard," she said softly, stepping closer. "Dominic, He didn't look up. "You shouldn't be here. She's dangerous." "I warned you." His voice dropped, low and lethal. "You knew about the car." Charlotte blinked. "What are you—" "The tracker. The messages, the security reports. All of it started with you." Her poise cracked. "You think I'd hurt her?" "You already did." He turned then, eyes cold enough to make her flinch. "You dragged her into this." "Into us!" "She dragged herself," Charlotte snapped. "She's been lying to you since the moment she came back." "That child—" "Don't," her voice faltered. "She's not yours." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Dominic's gaze hardened. "You've done enough, Charlotte. Leave before I decide I've tolerated you too long." She laughed once, brittle. "I did it for you." "No," he said quietly. "You did it because you couldn't stand the thought of me loving someone who wasn't you." Charlotte's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she walked away. Her reflection vanishing into the glass doors, hours blurred. The monitors beeped softly in Evelyn's room. Dominic sat beside her bed, elbows on his knees, staring at her hand. He had seen her broken before, 5 years ago in another hospital, when he'd thought he'd lost her for good. Now here she was again, pale, fragile, alive. He didn't notice the nurse until she whispered, "You can talk to her. She can probably hear you." He leaned forward, voice low. "You're safe now?" "Leah's okay. She's beautiful, Evelyn. You would have been proud even if she weren't yours. But she is, isn't she?" A faint sound escaped her, half sigh, half sob. Her fingers twitched around his. When she woke fully, dawn was creeping through the blinds. The light made the world soft, golden, forgiving. Evelyn blinked slowly, confusion giving way to recognition. "You stayed," he nodded. "You didn't give me much of a choice." Her eyes filled. "Leah?" "She's fine. Sleeping in the waiting room." A tear slid down her temple. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." I don't care how I found out, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. I just care that I almost lost you both before I could. Evelyn turned her head slightly toward him. I wanted to tell you. Every time I saw you, every time you looked at me and didn't know why it hurt so much. Why didn't you? Because your parents would have taken her from me. From us. You know they would. He did. And for the first time, he had no defense. He closed his eyes, shoulders trembling. You carried this alone, she smiled faintly. You would have done the same. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. You think this means I forgive you? No, she whispered. It means you still love me. He couldn't argue. Instead, he leaned closer, pressing his forehead against hers. You don't have to run anymore. I don't know how to stop. Then we'll learn together. Outside, the storm broke for good. Light spilled through the window, touching the white sheets, the IV lines, the faint tremble of her smile. In the hallway, Leah stirred awake. She held a drawing in her lap, 3 stick figures under a bright yellow sun, the words, me, mommy, and the man from the picture, written in crooked letters. She rubbed her eyes and looked toward the door, where Dominic's shadow fell against the glass. For the first time in 5 years, the house of ghosts inside her mother's chest finally went quiet. The apartment was quiet, in a way that felt almost unnatural, as if the city outside had paused its relentless hum in recognition of the storm that had just passed. Dominic sat across from Evelyn, fingers tapping restlessly on the armrest, his eyes locked on hers. Leah was nestled between them, the child asleep, exhausted from the emotional weight of the past days. Dominic's chest still ached, not from physical exertion, but from the pressure of emotions he had kept buried. Relief, frustration, anger, longing, and love collided inside him, threatening to overwhelm. Evelyn, he began, voice low but commanding, I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning, no omissions. Every message, every threat, every step you took. I need the truth. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she reached for her tea mug, a futile attempt to steady her nerves. Her gaze met his, and in that single moment, the weight of all the secrets she had carried pressed down with crushing force. She had imagined this confrontation 1,000 times in her mind, how she would explain, how she would justify, but nothing could prepare her for the intensity of his gaze. She began, voice barely above a whisper. The messages, the threats, none of them were from you. I thought I could protect you, and I thought leaving would shield Leah and me. But I see now, I see how wrong I was. Dominic's jaw tightened, a tremor of anger flaring beneath the surface. Wrong, Evelyn? Do you realize the risk you put yourself in? The danger you invited into both your life and mine? Do you understand how close we came? How close Leah came? I know, she whispered, tears welling. I tried to keep us safe, all of us. I thought I could control it. I was wrong. I'm so sorry, Dominic, truly. His chest heaved. Relief battled with fury and lingering hurt. Slowly, painfully, he reached across the gap and took her hand. The warmth, the trembling, the honesty in her eyes, they pierced through the layers of anger. Evelyn, I've been protecting you silently, keeping threats from ever reaching you, yet you suffered alone. I didn't want to burden you, she admitted, her voice cracking. I thought I was protecting you, and I thought I was protecting Leah. But now I see how foolish I was. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted us. Dominic's fingers curled around hers, holding on tightly as he tried to absorb the confession. The tension broke suddenly, a quiet surrender between them. Not in words, but in the relief of shared truth. He pulled her into an embrace, and for a long moment, they clung to each other in silence, letting the tidal wave of emotion wash over them. For the first time in days, the air in the apartment felt breathable. The shadows cast by Greer and Charlotte, the schemes and manipulations faded for a fleeting moment, leaving Dominic and Evelyn suspended in the fragile safety of honesty and trust. Their fragile calm shattered hours later. Dominic had returned from Vale Industries, documents in hand, when his phone buzzed violently. A single message, stark and unyielding, froze him to the core. Leah Monroe. Alive for now? Sign over Vale Industries or she dies. Gee, his blood ran cold. Dominic's eyes locked onto Evelyn, whose face paled instantly. Greer, he's taken her, she whispered, horror lacing her voice. Dominic didn't hesitate. Adrenaline surged through him, fury and fear coiling together. He grabbed his coat, moved toward the door. Evelyn followed instinctively, despite the tremor in her legs, drawn by instinct and concern. Every street corner, every passing shadow, became a potential threat. Dominic's mind worked with calculated speed, planning every step to rescue his daughter. Charlotte watched from her penthouse, observing the city cameras, a faint frown crossing her face. Initially detached, she realized that the stakes had shifted dangerously. For the first time, she saw the limits of her manipulations, the consequences of underestimating Greer's ruthlessness. Yet she remained frozen, torn between curiosity, strategy, and the faint, unacknowledged pang of conscience. Dominic arrived at the warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a skeletal, abandoned structure, shadows clinging to the walls. Men moved efficiently in the dim light, shadows flickering, a single bulb casting harsh lines across the concrete. And there, in the center, Leah, bound to a chair, wide-eyed and trembling but unharmed, for now. Evelyn sat nearby, her body tense, eyes locked on Dominic as they met. Greer emerged from the shadows, his smile cold, controlled, and malicious. So predictable, Dominic. And yet, here you are. Now the transfer is simple, or the child dies. Dominic's voice was a low growl, controlled fury coiled like a spring. Let them go. All of them. Now. Greer's laughter cut through the tense air. You think it's that easy? This isn't a game. It's leverage. And leverage is power. You have exactly one choice, Dominic. Dominic's eyes swept the room, measuring distances, noting every weapon, every shadow, every possible trap. But beneath the calculated mind was raw emotion, fear, love, and a fury so primal it burned. He could not, would not, allow harm to come to his daughter, or Evelyn. The tension snapped into action. Dominic moved like a predator, silent and precise, taking out Greer's men one by one, neutralizing the threat with skill and urgency. Evelyn, sensing his approach, whispered Leah's name, voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. I'm here, Dominic whispered back. I've got you. Greer, realizing the tide had turned, triggered an explosion, an attempt to destroy evidence, and he assumed everyone inside. Fire roared, smoke swallowed the room, and debris tumbled in chaotic clouds. Dominic shielded Evelyn and Leah, body moving instinctively, mind sharp, every movement choreographed by necessity and desperation. Through smoke, heat, and chaos, he guided them toward an exit, debris raining down around them. Flames licked at the concrete walls, glass shattered, and dust choked the air. Every heartbeat was synchronized with the urgency of survival, each step a calculated risk. Finally, they emerged into the cool night air. Dominic held Leah tightly, her small arms around his neck, while Evelyn clung to his side. The smoke and heat gave way to relief, though Dominic's eyes still searched for Greer. The man had vanished into the inferno, leaving behind destruction, but not certainty of death. Charlotte arrived shortly after, her elegant facade barely masking the shock and awe she felt. She had anticipated manipulations, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. Dominic had faced death, fire and deception, and emerged victorious, protecting both Evelyn and Leah. Dominic's gaze met hers, icy and unyielding. Stay out of my family's way, he said, voice cold but firm. Everything else is negotiable, but my family is untouchable. Charlotte realized then the futility of control. For all her schemes, all her strategies, Dominic's bond with Evelyn and Leah was impervious. She understood in a rare flash of clarity that the fire had revealed truth, loyalty, and love that no manipulation could ever touch. Dominic, holding his daughter and Evelyn, watched the last embers of the warehouse blaze die out. The city pulsed indifferent beyond the fire, but inside a family had been forged in danger, honesty, and survival. He whispered to Evelyn, voice soft and raw. We survived. We're together, and I will never let anything harm either of you again." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, exhaling fully for the first time in days. Leah giggled softly, her trust absolute, her innocence intact, and Dominic realized, in the quiet aftermath of fire and chaos, that their story, marked by deception, danger, and revelation, had only just begun, bound together by the unshakable truth of family and love. The morning sunlight spilled across the Vale Holdings boardroom, glinting off polished surfaces and catching the dust motes dancing lazily in the air. Dominic stood alone at his father's former office, the once familiar space now a gallery of memories tinged with betrayal. Each award, every framed photo of corporate milestones suddenly seemed hollow. The empire he had inherited, the symbol of power and prestige, was riddled with lies, manipulation, and shadows cast by the man who had raised him. He had spent years fighting external threats, corporate rivals, Greer's schemes, Charlotte's machinations, yet he never suspected the betrayal closest to him. The man who had shaped his upbringing, his ambitions, his life, his father, Richard Vale. Dominic picked up a thick folder left on the corner of the mahogany desk, its edges slightly worn. Inside were documents, photographs, emails, and financial records, all proof that Richard had conspired with Greer 5 years ago. The accident that separated him from Evelyn, the orchestrated obstacles that kept him from discovering Leah, the manipulations that had left him isolated, all of it pointed to his father. Dominic sank into the leather chair, chest tightening. Anger, grief, and disbelief collided violently. All these years, he muttered under his breath. He had believed Greer was the mastermind, Charlotte an accomplice. But his own blood had pulled the strings, prioritizing ambition over family. The revelation cut deeper than any betrayal he had ever faced. Evelyn entered quietly, sensing his turmoil. "Dominic, what is it?" Her voice was soft but laced with concern. She took the folder, scanning the contents. Her eyes widened, reflecting the same shock and disbelief that Dominic felt. This is... Your father?" Dominic nodded slowly, jaw clenched. "He manipulated everything, my life, our lives. All to secure Vale Holdings. He didn't just betray me. He destroyed years of my happiness. My relationship with you, with Leah, all stolen by his ambition." Evelyn's hand sought his, squeezing it gently. "We have the proof now, and we can expose it." Dominic exhaled, the anger slowly giving way to resolve. "Yes, but first, I need to step away from Vale. I can't rebuild this empire without purging it from lies. I'll resign, and the truth must come out fully. Nothing hidden, nothing left to manipulation or fear." The gravity of the moment settled over them. After years of scheming, betrayal, and danger, the path to redemption lay ahead. Not just for Dominic, but for the legacy of the company, and for the family he was finally reclaiming. Dominic's resignation announcement was scheduled for a Thursday morning. The boardroom of Vale Holdings was packed with journalists, cameras flashing relentlessly, the low murmur of anticipation filling the room. Dominic stood at the podium, impeccably dressed, posture erect, his expression solemn yet unflinching. Behind him, Evelyn held Leah's hand, offering quiet support, her presence a grounding force. He began, voice steady and deliberate. "For years, Vale Holdings has been a symbol of ambition and innovation, but it has also been a symbol of secrecy, manipulation, and betrayal. Today, I step down as CEO to reveal the truth. My father, Richard Vale, conspired with Vincent Greer 5 years ago to sabotage my personal life, separate me from the woman I loved, and manipulate the company for personal gain. This deception endangered not just me, but my family, and the integrity of Vale Holdings." A murmur rippled through the room. Charlotte, seated in the back, felt a cold dread twist in her stomach. Her complicity, her silence, her manipulations, exposed indirectly through Dominic's courageous truth-telling. She realized that power, influence, and money could be meaningless when confronted by honesty and moral conviction. Dominic continued, addressing the gathered press with unwavering calm. "Vale Holdings will now undergo a complete restructuring, Transparency audits, legal reviews, and accountability measures will be implemented immediately. Greer, Charlotte, and all parties involved in this conspiracy will face justice. I am committed to cooperating fully with the authorities to ensure that truth and accountability prevail. Questions came fast, some accusatory, some shocked. Dominic answered each with composure, the weight of years of suppressed anger and frustration visible in his eyes, but balanced by resolve and moral clarity. Outside the building, the public reaction was instantaneous. Social media erupted, articles circulated, and discussions erupted around the fall of a corporate titan and the personal betrayals behind the headlines. Weeks later, Charlotte was arrested, charged with aiding and abetting Greer. The luxurious facade she had maintained crumbled under scrutiny. Dominic, Evelyn, and Leah watched from a distance, relief tempered by lingering sadness at the extent of betrayal they had endured. Vale Holdings, once a towering empire of influence, now faced collapse. But in its place, Dominic had established a foundation of truth, accountability, and integrity. 1 year later, Dominic, Evelyn, and Leah had relocated to the tranquil coast of Maine. The ocean waves, quiet towns, and pine-lined forests provided a peace they had never known. Dominic purchased a modest coastal home, far removed from the skyscrapers and chaos of New York. Sunlight poured into the windows, warm and inviting, carrying with it the sense of salt water and pine. They had built something new together. LIA Innovations, a startup founded on creativity, honesty, and innovation. Leah's drawings and ideas inspired projects. Evelyn's leadership shaped the company's vision. Dominic applied his strategic mind to steer the enterprise without the shadow of manipulation or corporate deceit. Life settled into a comforting rhythm. Mornings were spent walking along the beach, collecting shells and sharing laughter. Evenings were filled with shared meals, gentle conversations, and quiet reflection. Dominic reveled in the ordinary, moments of mundane domesticity that had once seemed impossible, yet now felt profoundly beautiful. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Dominic led Evelyn along the wind-swept shore. He reached into his coat pocket and drew out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that caught the last light of the sunset. "Evelyn," he began, voice steady yet soft. "We've survived deceit, danger, and separation. We've faced fire, betrayal, and loss. And through it all, we've found each other. You and Leah are my family, my home, my reason. Will you marry me?" Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears. "Yes. Yes, Dominic," she whispered, her voice trembling. Leah squealed in delight, clapping her hands as they embraced, the three of them holding each other tightly. The waves crashed behind them, a symphony of life and renewal. Yet even in Maine, shadows lingered. One night, a sleek black car rolled down the quiet road near their home. Its headlights dim, engine almost silent, it stopped at the edge of the forest. A figure emerged, familiar, menacing, Greer. Dominic's heart tightened, senses sharp, as he stepped protectively toward Evelyn and Leah. He had faced fire, betrayal, and near-death situations. But Greer's survival was a reminder that peace was fragile, temporary, and must be defended. The waves crashed against the shore. Indifferent yet eternal, Dominic looked at his family, holding them close. Whatever danger awaited, they would face it together. The fire of the past had forged them. The truth had freed them. And love had bound them. Greer's shadow lingered, a dark promise of challenges yet to come. But Dominic, Evelyn, and Leah stood ready. United, resilient, and unbroken. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the Maine coastline. Dominic stood on the porch of their modest home, the salty breeze tousling his hair, his arms wrapped around Evelyn and Leah. The laughter of their daughter mingled with the rhythm of the waves, a sound that had become the soundtrack of their new life. For the first time in years, Dominic felt truly free. The shadows of betrayal, corporate scheming, and danger still lingered at the edges of memory, but they no longer held power over him. Truth had prevailed, love had endured, and a family once fractured by lies was now whole. Evelyn rested her head against his shoulder, eyes shining with contentment. "We made it," she whispered. Yes, Dominic replied, voice low but firm. We survived everything, and now we can build our life, our way, together. Leah ran ahead toward the surf, her small feet splashing in the tide, and Dominic watched her with a mixture of pride, awe, and protectiveness. This little girl, the embodiment of hope and innocence, was the reason he had fought so hard, the reason he would continue to face whatever darkness remained. But the world was never completely safe. A black car rolled silently along the coastal road, headlights dim, engine barely humming. Its presence was subtle, almost a whisper against the crashing waves, but Dominic's instincts were sharp. Greer. Somehow he had survived. Somehow danger was not yet gone. Dominic's hand tightened around Evelyn's. Whatever comes, he said, voice steady. We face it together. Always. The car stopped for a moment, shadowed in the twilight, then disappeared down the winding road. The threat lingered, unseen but real, a reminder that life's battles were never fully over. Yet for now, on this quiet Maine evening, love, family, and resilience were enough. The fire had burned, the truth had been revealed, and redemption had been earned. Together, they watched the waves roll in, carrying away the ghosts of the past and bringing with them the promise of tomorrow. And somewhere in the darkness, Greer's eyes glinted, watching, waiting. But the Vale family was ready, united, unbroken. The sea whispered a vow of endurance, a promise that even in shadows hope could shine. And as the sun finally vanished below the horizon, Dominic held his family close, knowing that whatever the night brought, they would face it as one. Thank you so much for watching. We're so glad you joined us on this thrilling and emotional journey with Dominic, Evelyn, and Leah. Don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. How do you think Greer will appear next? What would you do if you were in Dominic's shoes? If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episodes. Every bit of support helps us create even more exciting stories.